Come to Reconnecting Africa. We are here in Algarve, Portugal, just next to the Museum of Slavery. As we know, our ancestors were taken against their will from Africa to the Americas. Meet one of the descendants of those who were taken to the Americas, Bahamas, isn't it? My brother, what's your name, my brother?
Nelson.
Nelson. Tell me, my brother, what do you think about the museum?
Well, I think there could be more history in it, but the history in itself is pretty intriguing. Having traced my ancestry from being slaves in North Carolina who sailed a boat from the plantation to the Caribbean and San Salvador Islands of the Bahamas, and that's where my ancestors sort of migrated to. But coming here, we wanted to come here to see the history of Lagos, the slave market. My wife Barbara, she recommended we come here, and I think it was a good idea to come here. It's intriguing that reading the history there, that slavery ended so long for Portugal after the British basically decided not to have slavery, and of course they were stopping ships in the Caribbean for slave ships and putting them off on the islands. But Portugal, having Brazil as their colony, after they ended slavery somewhere around 1861, I think it was, 20 years after that, they still had the apprentice slaves, basically to continue slavery on after slavery is supposed to end officially. And then some degree slavery still continued. So slavery certainly is an injustice in history. Today, how we can, overcome that is to education, helping each other and growing, our culture and community, and basically showing that, hey, although our ancestors were taken against their will from Africa, still today we still are people who are very resilient.
Just like our ancestors.
Yeah, right.
The theory is that our ancestors were there just standing, not fighting. No, that's not true.
That's not true. Many slaves, died on their way, being chained and taken. If they had the opportunity, they would throw themselves off the slave ships because they refused to be, put in slavery. Even though some, maintained, survived to get to the plantations or wherever where they were kept against their will, they still thrived. And, they did things to survive as any human would do. And, today, we're, the result of their endurance and their fortitude.
I think that would be really tragic if the young people coming up today don't realize their history and where they came from. And so that's why it's important to visit places like this. And I hope in our country that it doesn't come to where they erase our history of Africa and where we came from and try to make us not feel proud of where we came from. And even though we were an enslaved people, we became stronger because of it. So I just hope the young people fight to keep their history.
So this is your message to the young people,
Yes.
not just in Bahamas, not just in America, to really go back to themselves,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, realize that they are Africans.
Yes.
That they're strong.
Yeah.
They have a strong history. My grandmother, she told me how things were back in her day. Her father was an ex-slave, was an escaped slave, and how he thrived. He was able to run a little boat where he did cargo back and forth between the islands, was able to purchase land and created, place where they had horses, and they sold the hemp wrote to the American in World War II. So I mean, hardships were there, but one thing that stood out in her memories was endurance, hard work, and believe in what we gained from our culture.
Have you been to Africa yet or no?
Not yet.
Tony?
She has.
Oh, you've been to Africa where?
Kenya.
Kenya. So when you went to Africa, how did you feel?
Kenya is a beautiful country,
Yes.
but I also saw a lot of poverty as well. But it's immensely beautiful, and for that, I would like to go back and visit more countries. And when I was there, when I spoke with the people, the African people, in Kenya, it was interesting because the different tribes, like oh, yeah,
Okay, no, I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. But the
Maasai,
the Maasai, and there's another tribe, but each one wanted to claim me for their own, because they would look at me and they would say, "Oh, you're this." Or you look like this, or you look like my mother, or you look like my grandmother, and say, "You're mine," and that was an interesting
This is like you
experience.
came home.
Yes, that was an interesting experience, even though I've never traced my ancestry. But that was everywhere, every tribe trying to claim me for their own.
Of course, thinking of Africa as the motherland, just the community, right? Africa seems, the translation of the community from Africa is transferable all around the world,
Yeah.
and that's growing up. That's one thing, and family, they teach you community. Families first, you help others, and so family, I think.
Yeah. And do you see similarities?
Yes. I mean, let's face it, the music, the culture, the food. I mean, and I know Africans, all around the world, and we all have things in common. That's why we can relate, right? I mean, the food is similar. It's the variation of what came from Africa, and the vegetation, the fruits. I mean, in the Bahamas, we have the tamarind, we have, the soursop, we have, the yams. We have, all of that's from Africa,
And one thing that I notice about us black people, when it comes to fruit, we love mangoes.
Right. Yes. So all of that stuff is indigenous. It's in the Bahamas, right? So that's the similarities. And the Bahamian culture now that I think once we became independent in '72, in the '70s, we were able to form a tighter, relations with Africa, and then Ghana. A lot of African Bahamians live in Africa, in Ghana, in Kenya, and Africans live in the Bahamas, right? So it's sort of like an exchange of ideas and people. We import things from Africa to the Bahamas. So yeah, I mean,
That's a really good thing. After all, we are one people. We are brothers and sisters, from the same ancestors.
Yes.
What made us away from each other? We know what happened. We know the slavery, the colonization, manipulation, all those things. But we need to reconnect. And I heard recently that I think it's Bahamas, or it's trying to have a direct flight to Africa.
Yes.
That would be the best
I think to
thing
Ghana.
ever.
I think, yeah. Because I see we have I think no passport is required now to fly into Ghana from the Bahamas.
Okay.
So that's where the direct flight comes in,
Okay.
right? And I think it was reciprocal. The Ghanaians don't need a passport to come in or visa to come into the Bahamas. So so there are ties and connections that are starting to happen now. New trading, especially with the new Trump and the tariff thing.
Yeah.
So now that becomes much more important, in my opinion. But so there are connections.
Yeah, we go.
Yeah.
African people reconnecting, regardless of what people say. We are Africans, and It's time for us to reconnect wherever you were born.
Oh yeah.
Peter Tosh said, it doesn't matter where you come from. As long as you are black man, you are an African.
Yes.